everybody. Welcome to this very hot day, coming into the empowerment.work weekly community online chat. So it's really great that you've taken the time to still join us. And I just want to run through a couple of things before we start. Eoin is going to be our presenter for today. I'll tell you a bit more about him soon. But at the moment, we're going to record his presentation. And then before we go into breakout rooms, we're going to stop the recording. So everything that is discussed privately, then that's private, just for us. Just want to make sure that you're all aware that that's a safe space. And we're not going to be putting it on YouTube. Anyway, it's really great that you joined us today. We've been doing these weekly chats since the beginning of lockdown, which was March. And this is our last one. We're going to have a break in August, and then we're going to come back with the weekly chat in September, perhaps in a slightly different form, but they've been so successful and people have enjoyed them so much that it's not something we're going to stop. So I'd like now to introduce Eoin. Eoin's originally from Dublin, and he's now based in the Netherlands. He's an expert in strategic marketing. And I'm going to leave it at that and hand it over to him. I know he's going to share his presentation and also his, it's more about himself, so I won't fill in the gaps. He can do that himself. So Eoin, you're welcome to start. Thank you.
Cheers, Jane. Hi guys, can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. I know I can speak a bit fast at times, so I will try and keep the tempo down. As Jane said, my name is Eoin Kearney. If you can see my name on my screen, you will know that I now benefit from the new LinkedIn feature where you can record the pronunciation of your name. I've had some interesting ones over the years, including Eoin, Eoin, and my favorite was, I was like, yeah, that's me. So as Jane said, I'm going to share my screen. I'll go into a little bit more about myself and my background and the presentation today. If you do see that there's 33 slides, do not worry. It's not going to take that long to go through them. What will you see now? Okay, so can everybody see my screen there?
Yes, we can. I think so.
Yeah, perfect.
I just want to make sure that you can actually move to the next slide. That's the main thing.
I think I see what's wrong now. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, I just need to be in, I can't go into the full thing. Okay, so today we're going to discuss resolving a predicament. And basically, this process is using peer-to-peer help to be able to help you solve a problem or a dilemma that you may be facing in your personal life or your professional life. It can be used in both ways. So just give you an overview. I'm going to give you a small introduction. I'm going to ask you to think of a current predicament that is facing, that you're facing at the moment. The idea being is that when we do go into the breakout room, that one of you can put your idea or your predicament forward, and we can actually put this into practice, and you can actually use what we've run through to see how it actually works, and hopefully we can then benefit from the breakout room, but also then the feedback and discussion afterwards. I'll run through what peer-to-peer mentoring is, how it can help you, what the process overview is, do's and don'ts, feedback discussion, key takeaways, and then Q&A if you have any. So to give a little bit of background on myself, so my name is Eoin. I'm originally from Dublin in Ireland, but I've been lucky enough to have lived and worked in the US, France, and now the Netherlands. I originally started out my education in engineering before moving into communications and PR. I then did a master's in international marketing focused on agri-food and the food industry. And I was very lucky when I was based in New York, I had a portfolio that covered whiskey, beer, chocolate, and cheese. So you can imagine how good my weekends were. And then since then, I went on to continue working with my distillery clients before moving to France. And I actually set up a co-working hub, which is now up and running and doing quite well, or at least it was before COVID. And then I started another master's in business and leadership, which I was due to finish in June just gone, but unfortunately it's been postponed. So I hope to finish in the first weekend of September, all going according to plan. But my background basically covers branding, marketing, strategy, graphic design, but also coaching, people development, especially within teams that I've led. So as I asked you to think about a current predicament, just in your head, kind of something that you might be facing in work or in your professional life that you would be open to discussing within the breakout group, so that, you know, using a real case study, we can get the most from it. So what is peer-to-peer mentoring? Basically, when a lot of people have trouble, they'll go to their friends or family or a colleague and they'll have a discussion, but it tends to be back and forth. So it's one-on-one, or there's a constant dialogue. Peer-to-peer mentoring allows you to present a case to your peer group. And through the process, it allows you to take a step back and allow them to analyze and discuss your problem and how you could go about solving it, with you looking in from the outside as opposed to being part of the discussion. So how can it help you? So an old mentor and managing director of mine, it was founded an innovation company called Catawave. And their whole belief system was that every problem in industry has probably been solved just in a different industry. And it's important to look into this and to see, you know, what type of solutions can be applied or can be changed slightly to actually work for you. And the example that he had given to me, which has stuck with me, is that if you ask somebody to move a liquid from one place to another, they'll automatically suggest piping or maybe buckets, where in the medical industry, they use syringes. So it's being able to think outside the box, but also being able to use something and adapt it then. So not every solution is going to work exactly as it did before. And it is about kind of being able to twist and help it work. So we're going to go into the process overview, and this is where hopefully we'll start to make a bit more sense. So there are 5 steps, and each step is 5 minutes. And it's important that you stick to that 5-minute timeline, because it enables you to keep structure and not to go over and to kind of vary away from the goal. So step 1 is the presentation of the problem. So in our breakout group, for example, one of you guys can come with the problem, and you have 5 minutes to describe and explain the predicament or the dilemma that you're currently facing. Once that 5 minutes is up, there is then 5 minutes that are allowed questions and answers for you to clarify. So this is where your peer group can then come to you with questions that will help them get more of a sense of what the problem is and where it stemmed from. You will find that depending on people's backgrounds and own experiences, the questions can vary quite significantly, because some people will need different information to be able to make their decisions. In the third step, this is where the presenter, the case presenter, now stands back. On Zoom, what I would suggest for this is that if you've given your case, that you now mute and hide your video. And what this allows you to do is basically just sit back in the background. And now for the next 5 minutes, you will hear the peers actually start to take apart your problem and look at the individual pieces and, you know, what can be done in order to solve it. The next 5 minutes is then the action brainstorm. And that's when the peer group, with you still out of the room, now discusses what actions can be taken and what plans can be put in place in order to help you solve and progress past this dilemma that you're facing. And then the final 5 minutes, the peer group now again take a step back and mute themselves. And the reflection period is now where the case presenter is actually able to talk through what they have just heard the peer group discussing. And through this, then the peer group are able to hear the solutions that the presenter has been able to pull from there, but also the presenter is able to do it in a way that they're talking out loud and discussing the problem. Remember that it is time sensitive. So the first step is only for the case presenter. The second step is for both the peer group and the case presenter. And then the next 2 steps are purely just for the peer group. And then the 5th and final is for the case presenter. An interesting way to think of it is that for the case presenter, there's 4 distinct sections. There's the information section where you inform the peer group. You have the clarification step where you then clarify. You then listen before you, final step, which is where you distill what you've heard and how best to solve your problem. For the peer group, it's slightly different. The first step is actually listening, which is very important in order to be able to get all the information you require. The next step then again is to clarify. The third step is discussion. It's in the fourth step that the peer group actually distill, and then they listen again on the fifth and final step. So the way to approach this, there's 2 different types of questions. So the first is the specific and kind of factual questions that will allow you to get kind of a real underlying understanding. And those type of questions are: what steps have already been taken? What steps have not been taken? Who are the stakeholders, and what is the end goal? So these questions just help you clarify the situation. Of course, there's many more questions that can be asked than just these ones. One of the big ones to really understand is: what is the end goal? So for example, let's just take a scenario where the case presenter's dilemma is that they were up for a promotion, but they got overpassed and they didn't get the promotion. So their problem is, you know, what did they do about it? How did they confront it to move on to the next step? Their overall goal might not necessarily to be to get a promotion immediately out of this, but it might be to just understand why they got passed over. So it's important that the end goal is understood from the case presenter's point of view, because that way then their problem can be answered. If you go with multiple different solutions for a problem that they didn't, or an end goal that they don't actually want, then it's not that beneficial. The next section then is probing questions. And these are ones like: what is at stake? How will others view the situation? What has contributed to the problem? Has the presenter fueled the problem in any way? And are there any underlying or hidden issues? So these are those type of questions that you can really get to the nitty gritty. And these are going to be the questions that will differ most significantly from peer to peer. Because depending on the way they think and their own experiences, they will ask kind of more probing questions. Now it comes to the do's and the don'ts. So the do's are in relation to the case presenter, and the don'ts are in relation to the peer-to-peer group. So in the do's, it's very important that you do be honest about the situation. So make sure that you look at it from both sides, that you are honest about any factors that you may have created or contributed to in the problem, and remain open to what your peers have to say. So remember, this is a safe space. It's a very private space. This will not be discussed outside of the break room and our feedback discussion area. And at the end of the day, it is very much to help you. So the more honest you can be about a situation, the greater the outcome can be. On the don'ts, and again, as I said, this is for the peer group, it's very important that you don't allow the presenter to defend or continue to explain after the second step. Because this is just your general one-on-one, is that when you give a problem and then someone gives you a solution, but then you interrupt and you don't allow the flow to happen. So it's important that the presenter does step back from after the second step. Don't jump to conclusions or solutions too quickly. This goes back to the goal. You know, make sure you understand the goal, but also make sure that you've asked questions that allow you to get a proper understanding of the background of the problem. Don't forget to consider the problem through the eyes of the presenter. So this is where you do have to take a step back and put yourself in their shoes, both on a personal level. So how are they feeling from this, from the 10 minutes where they were able to speak? What kind of feeling did you get from them of how this is actually affecting them? But also on a professional level, or if it's a personal level, in whatever it is related to. So make sure you keep in mind to keep looking through their eyes at this. And then the final one is, don't be afraid to be honest. You know, we're not here to be patted on the back or to to have something handed to us that just because we want to hear it. It's very important that you give honest feedback, of course, tactfully. We're not here to be aggressive or offensive to anyone, but from my experience, having done this and having given my dilemma and being able to stand back, being able to hear the honest discussion, for me was much more beneficial than when I have discussed it on a one-to-one basis. So we're going to go into the breakout group now. So we're going to stop the recording. At this point, does anyone have a dilemma that they feel they would be happy to bring to the group?